Two rookies just walked into an NFL cornerback room and started taking snaps that nobody handed them. One of them wasn't even supposed to be healthy enough to compete this early. The other one was labeled too small to survive in this league. And right now, both of them are proving everybody wrong at the exact same time. Before we get into this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next in this secondary. Here's the situation. The Las Vegas cornerback room walked into training camp with more question marks than answers. And out of nowhere, two rookies are turning those question marks into exclamation points. The first name you need to know is Jermod McCoy. Coming out of Tennessee, this guy was being talked about as a possible top 10 pick, some people even had him as the best cornerback in the entire draft class. Then a knee injury hit, and just like that, teams got spooked. He fell all the way to the 4th round. Las Vegas jumped on the opportunity and grabbed him. Now here's the thing people need to understand, his talent was never actually in question. The question was always health. Would his knee hold up? Would he even be able to practice on back-to-back days without setbacks? For a while, the answer was no. He was being handled carefully, limited reps, no consecutive days on the field, basically wrapped in bubble wrap while the training staff nursed him back. But something has shifted. He's now practicing on consecutive days. He's taking snaps with the first-team defense. He's in pads, he's hitting, and his body is responding exactly the way the Raiders hoped it would. That's story number 1, and it's a big one. Story number 2 is Hezekiah Masses, who everybody's calling Zeke. This guy was picked way later in the draft, and the criticism around him wasn't about health, it was about size. Scouts questioned whether he had the frame to hold up against physical NFL receivers and tight ends in run support. Too skinny, they said. Won't be able to tackle at this level, they said. Well, Zeke Masses has been busy proving every single one of those scouting reports wrong. He is not just making the roster, he's out there taking reps with the starting defense, battling for a starting job as a rookie who barely got drafted on day 3. In an interview, when he was directly asked about that criticism regarding physicality, his response was blunt. He said that was the biggest knock on him, that people said he couldn't tackle, and now he's out to prove all of them wrong, every single game. So here's the full picture in one sentence: a former first-round talent who fell due to injury, and a small school-size question mark who fell due to scouting doubts, are both currently out there taking valuable first-team reps in training camp, forcing a coaching staff to consider giving real starting jobs to two rookies nobody thought would be ready this early. That's the entire story. Now let's actually dig into why this matters so much. Now here's a question worth sitting with for a second: how often does a franchise get this lucky twice in the same draft class, in the same position group, at the same time? Because normally you hit on one steal like this, maybe, if you're fortunate. Getting two cornerbacks who both slipped for very different reasons and are both outperforming expectations this fast. That's rare. That's the kind of thing fan bases dream about and almost never actually get. Let's slow down on Jermod McCoy for a minute because his story deserves more attention. Think about what it actually means to be considered a possible top 10 talent and then watch your name slide all the way to round 4. That's not a small drop. That's a gut punch. Teams weren't doubting his hands, his instincts, his speed, or his ball skills. They were scared of a knee injury that had doctors and front offices around the league nervous enough to pass on a player some evaluators had rated as the best corner in the entire class. Imagine sitting in your living room on draft night, watching pick after pick go by, knowing you're good enough to be gone in the first round, and instead you're waiting, and waiting, until day 3 finally comes around. That's a special kind of frustration. That's the kind of thing that either breaks a young player's confidence or lights a fire under him that never goes out. Based on everything coming out of camp, it lit a fire. And here's what makes his recovery story even more interesting: this wasn't a guy who tore something in college and had months to rehab before entering the league. He essentially hadn't played a live snap in over a year. Think about that jump. Going from 0 competitive reps for over 12 months straight into practicing against NFL-caliber talent. That is an enormous leap, both physically and mentally. The speed of the game at this level, the size of the players, the physicality, that's a shock to anybody's system, let alone someone coming off a long injury layoff. Yet McCoy has trusted the training staff's plan, followed the gradual build-up they designed for him, and is now not just surviving in camp, he's thriving. He's out there most days now, not every single day yet, but far more consistently than anyone predicted this early. That's a massive step forward from where this storyline started. There's also something worth noting about his mentality. When asked directly whether the way he fell in the draft created a chip on his shoulder, his answer wasn't some generic coach speak. He said that feeling is going to stay with him forever, that it's going to keep pushing him forward. That's not somebody who's satisfied just because he made a roster. That's somebody who remembers every team that passed on him and plans on making every single one of them regret it. He even talked about wanting multiple interceptions as a rookie, wanting to compete for all rookie honors, and being open to returning punts just to get his hands on the football more often. That's not the mindset of a guy playing it safe on a knee recovery. That's the mindset of a competitor who feels like the league owes him an apology, and he's going to collect it one game at a time. Now let's shift over to Zeke Masses, because his story hits from a completely different angle, but it's just as compelling. This isn't an injury story. This is a size and doubt story. Every scouting report on this kid circled the same concern: is he going to be physical enough? Can he actually hold up in run support against NFL-sized bodies? Those are legitimate questions for any smaller defensive back entering the league. But here's the thing about doubt: some players shrink from it, and some players use it as fuel. Masses is clearly the second type. When he was asked directly about wanting to face different competition to prove that criticism wrong, his exact words were about wanting to be aggressive, about wanting to show everybody exactly how physical he can be. That's not fear talking. That's a guy who has been waiting for the chance to shut people up. What's remarkable is the way he's carrying himself while doing it. He's not walking around camp acting like he's already made it. In interviews, he's been humble, crediting his faith, crediting his teammates, crediting the coaches who are trusting him with real reps, but underneath that humility is a clear undertone of confidence. When asked if he believes he's the best cornerback out there, his answer was immediate, no hesitation: yes, 100%. That combination, humble off the field but supremely confident when the pads go on, is exactly the kind of makeup teams look for in a player they hope becomes a long-term piece of their defense. Now here's your question of the day, and I genuinely want to hear your take on this one down in the comments. Between these two, who do you think ends up being the better long-term player for this franchise, the former first-round talent who fell due to injury in Jermod McCoy, or the doubted, undersized fighter in Zeke Masses? Drop your answer below because I've seen arguments for both, and I want to know where the fan base actually stands on this. Let's talk about why this situation is putting real pressure on the coaching staff. Training camp reps are not the same as regular season snaps, everybody knows that. But coaches do not hand out first-team reps to rookies just to be nice. If a rookie is getting run with the starting defense, it's because the coaching staff sees something worth developing right now, not 2 years down the road. Neither McCoy nor Masses is being given anything. They are earning every single rep through performance, and that is forcing difficult roster decisions that this coaching staff probably wasn't expecting to face this early in the process. Think about the incoming veterans and other defensive backs on this roster who now have to look over their shoulder at two rookies who were barely expected to contribute early in their first seasons. That's the kind of internal competition that makes a position group better across the board. Nobody wants to lose their job to a rookie, so now everybody in that room has to elevate their level just to keep up. That's a positive ripple effect that goes beyond just these two names. There's also a bigger historical lesson buried in this story, one that fans of every franchise should pay attention to. Some of the best value picks in league history have come from exactly these two profiles: the talented player who fell due to injury concerns, and the smaller, doubted player who outworked his draft slot. Teams that hit on both types in the same draft class often end up building the foundation of a defense that sticks around for years. It doesn't always work out, injuries can resurface, physical limitations can eventually catch up to a player at the highest level of competition. But when it does work out, it changes the trajectory of an entire position group, sometimes an entire defense. And that leads to a second question worth asking yourself: how many times have you watched a team pass on a talented player purely because of medical or measurable concerns, only to watch that same player go on to outperform players who were drafted ahead of him? It happens more often than people like to admit, and it's part of why scouting will never be a perfect science no matter how much data teams collect. Zoom out for a second and look at where this cornerback room started the offseason. This was viewed as one of the weaker areas on the roster, a unit full of question marks with very little proven depth. Fast forward through training camp, and suddenly there are legitimate conversations happening about whether two rookies deserve real playing time, maybe even starting roles, in their very first season. That's not a small shift. That's a complete change in outlook for an entire position group in the span of a few weeks. Neither of these two rookies is satisfied with simply making the roster. Listen to the way they talk. McCoy wants interceptions, wants to be an impact returner, wants recognition as one of the top rookies in the league this year. Masses wants to physically punish receivers who thought he was too small to matter. These aren't players hoping to hang on to a roster spot. These are players who believe they belong on the field with the starters, and every single day of camp, they're backing that belief up with their play. If both of these rookies keep this pace going into the regular season, the coaching staff is going to have some genuinely difficult conversations about who starts and who doesn't in that secondary. And that's exactly the kind of problem every fan base wants their team to have: too much talent, not enough spots to go around. Two rookie cornerbacks are not just making plays anymore, they're making veterans in that locker room stand up and take notice. And what's happening between these two young guys off the field might be even more important than what they're doing on it. Let's start with the biggest point here, because this is bigger than just flashy plays in practice. Scouting reports are not a permanent verdict on a player. They only show what shows up on tape. And here's something worth remembering: not seeing a skill on film doesn't mean the player doesn't have it. Sometimes a player was never put in the situation to show it. That's exactly what's happening with these two rookies right now. Every concern that came up before the draft was real at the time. Nobody's denying that. But the real question was always going to be answered later, in real time, once these guys actually got on an NFL field. And that's exactly what we're watching unfold. Both players knew exactly what was being said about them heading into the league, and now they're setting out to prove those doubts wrong, while also proving the coaching staff right for believing in them. Here's the thing about training camp: everybody talks a big game. Every single team, every single year, says the same things. Great culture, great off-season, best shape of my life. That talk is cheap. What isn't cheap is actual production on the field, day after day, against real competition. And that's exactly what separates these two rookies from the noise. They're not just saying the right things in interviews, they're backing it up every single practice. Jermod McCoy talked openly about the process of getting his body and mind back into football shape after such a long layoff. He admitted that the first day back was tough, that his stamina wasn't where it needed to be yet, and that he had to work his way back into understanding the pre-snap reads and technical details that come naturally after repetition. But he also pointed to a specific turning point, somewhere around his second or third day back, where he made a few plays and it just clicked. That's the moment things started feeling normal again. That kind of honesty matters. He's not pretending the transition was seamless. He's telling you straight up there was rust, and then he shook it off within days. Zeke Masses, meanwhile, has been on an entirely different kind of run. He's gone from taking third-string reps, to second-string reps, to now regularly working with the first-team defense, all because of the plays he keeps making in practice. When asked directly if he feels like he's in a rhythm right now, his answer was simple and confident: yes, completely. He's just out there being himself and executing what the coaches are calling. That's not arrogance. That's a player who has found his comfort zone and is now just playing football at a high level without overthinking it. Both of these rookies are also leaning heavily on veteran leadership in that defensive back room, and that might be the most encouraging part of this entire situation. McCoy specifically named older veterans in that group, guys like Eric Stokes and Jeremy Chin, as players he constantly goes to with questions, trying to speed up his understanding of the professional game. He talked about working with Stokes specifically on technique and pre-snap reads, identifying what he's seeing before the ball is even snapped. Masses named Chin as well, someone who's been in this league a long time and knows all the details that come with being a professional. Chin, according to Masses, checks in on him constantly, making sure he's doing things the right way both on and off the field. So here's the full picture in one clean sentence: these two rookies are backing up their physical talent with actual football intelligence. They're both leaning on veteran leadership to accelerate their growth, and instead of treating each other purely as competition for the same open cornerback spot, they've become close friends who push one another every single day. That's the entire story of where these two stand heading into their first preseason action. Now let's dig deeper into why all of this actually matters. Think about the jump these two are making. Going from college football to the NFL isn't just about being fast or strong. These guys were already elite athletes or they wouldn't be here. The real jump is mental. It's about recognizing route concepts before they fully develop. It's about understanding what an opposing offense likes to run based on formation and tendency. It's about picking up an entirely new vocabulary of coaching terminology that has nothing to do with the version of football they grew up playing. When Masses was asked what the biggest difference was between college ball and the pros, his answer wasn't about speed or size, it was about terminology, how the coaches communicate concepts and techniques. That might sound small, but that's actually one of the hardest parts of transitioning to this level. Football is football everywhere, but the language around it changes completely, and if a player can't process that language fast enough in real time, all the physical talent in the world won't matter. Here's a question worth thinking about. How many talented rookies have washed out of this league not because they lacked ability, but because they simply couldn't process the mental side fast enough to keep up? It happens constantly. Coaches will not put a young cornerback on the field against a real offense if that player doesn't fully understand assignments, leverage, and communication with the rest of the secondary. A confused rookie corner gets exposed instantly at this level. So the fact that both of these players are earning consistent first-team reps tells you everything about where they stand mentally, not just physically. Coaches simply do not burn valuable practice reps on players who aren't ready to process what's happening in front of them. This is actually the most encouraging piece of everything coming out of these interviews. It's not the confidence, it's not the highlight plays, it's the willingness both of these players show to admit they still have a lot to learn. Talented rookies who shorten their learning curve the fastest are almost always the ones who accept coaching without ego, who go out of their way to learn from veterans instead of assuming their college success translates automatically. Both of these guys are doing exactly that. Now here's your question of the day, and I want a real answer from you in the comments. Do you think it's actually better for a team's long-term success when two rookies are pushing each other for the same starting spot like this, or does that kind of open competition end up slowing down individual development because neither guy ever fully locks in the job? I've seen both arguments made about situations like this, and I genuinely want to know where you land. Let's talk about the relationship between these two, because this part of the story deserves way more attention than it usually gets. These aren't two guys grinding away separately, quietly hoping the other one fails so they can lock down the job. McCoy described their relationship as close, saying they talk constantly about what they're seeing on the field, coaching each other up, and that their mindsets are remarkably similar because they both want to be the very best. Masses echoed that same sentiment, saying they came into the league together, share a locker room right next to each other, and talk every single day. That's not the dynamic of two rivals circling each other. That's the dynamic of two teammates who happen to be competing for a similar role while genuinely wanting to see each other succeed. That distinction matters more than people realize. There's a difference between competing against someone and competing with someone. When two young players are truly competing against each other in an unhealthy way, you sometimes see guys hold back information, avoid helping the other person improve, treat every practice like a zero-sum game. That is not what's happening here. These two are pushing each other, elevating each other, and making one another better through healthy repetition and shared drive. From a team-building standpoint, that is exactly the dynamic you want at a position group that had major question marks heading into the season. Here's the bigger picture for that cornerback room as a whole. One starting spot appears to be locked down already by an established veteran on one side of the field. The other side is wide open, and that's exactly where this entire competition is playing out. Instead of one rookie clearly separating himself and coasting, you have two players pushing each other incrementally better every single day. That kind of internal competition tends to produce more well-rounded, battle-tested players by the time the real season starts, because neither guy can afford to relax even for a single practice. Zoom out and look at what this means going into that first preseason game. Confidence built in training camp only means so much until it's tested against a different opponent, in a different environment, with real intensity ramping up. That's the actual proving ground. Everything these two have shown in camp, the physical plays, the mental growth, the leadership they're absorbing from veterans, all of it gets put to the test the moment the lights come on for real. If both of these rookies carry this same level of production into live preseason action, that cornerback room stops being a question mark and starts becoming one of the more promising young position groups on the entire roster. And that's really the story here. Two rookies who came into the league carrying very different doubts, one about health, one about size and physicality, are answering those doubts together, pushing each other, learning from the veterans around them, and building something that looks less like a temporary training camp storyline and more like the foundation of a defense for years to come.